The fabric tore like thunder in the silent reception hall. 200 pairs of eyes watched as Marcus Babatunde Okonkwo, still in his wedding tuxedo, ripped the emerald dress from his pregnant ex-wife's shoulders, leaving her standing in her slip before Lagos's elite. "This," he announced with a cruel smile, "is what happens to women who don't know their place." But Adeline Palisade Williams didn't cry. She didn't run. She simply looked at him with those steady brown eyes and said 5 words that would haunt him forever. "Thank you for this gift." 3 weeks earlier everything had been different. 3 weeks earlier Kui Lagos. The invitation arrived on expensive cream cardstock, delivered by a uniformed courier to Adeline's modest apartment in Ikeja. She stood in her doorway, one hand unconsciously resting on her 6-month belly, staring at the gold-embossed letters that spelled out her worst nightmare. "Mr. Marcus Babatunde Okonkwo and Miss Chidinma Nwosu request the honor of your presence at their wedding ceremony." "That bastard," Jennifer Omolara Adeyemi muttered, snatching the card from Ade's trembling fingers. Lara had been Ade's best friend since their days at the University of Lagos, and now, as a corporate lawyer, she'd witnessed every devastating moment of Ade's divorce. "He's inviting you to watch him marry his secretary? The woman he was sleeping with while you were married." Ade walked slowly to her small balcony overlooking the crowded streets of Ikeja. The evening air was thick with humidity, and the smell of suya grilling from the vendor below. 6 months ago, she'd lived in a mansion in Victoria Island with marble floors and a view of the Atlantic Ocean. 6 months ago, she'd been Mrs. Okonkwo, wife of one of Lagos's most successful real estate developers. 6 months ago, she hadn't known that her husband was a monster. "There's a note," Lara said, her voice tight with anger. She read aloud. "Adeline, I want to end things properly between us. Come celebrate this new chapter. Let's show Lagos that we're civilized people. Your presence would mean everything." "Marcus." "Civilized," Ade repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. There was nothing civilized about a man who'd thrown her out of their home the day she announced her pregnancy. Nothing civilized about a man who'd forced her to sign away her rights to their jointly built architectural firm in exchange for a pittance of a settlement. Nothing civilized about a man who'd spread rumors throughout Lagos society that she'd been unfaithful, that the child she carried might not even be his. But Ade had learned something important in these 6 months of struggle and humiliation. She'd learned that sometimes, to defeat a monster, you had to walk into the monster's den. "I'm going," she said quietly. "Ade, no. I'm going, Lara." She turned to face her friend, and something in her expression made Lara fall silent. But not for the reason he thinks. Over the next 3 weeks, Ade threw herself into preparation. During the day, she worked on freelance architectural projects from her laptop, slowly rebuilding the career Marcus had tried to destroy. At night, she worked on something else entirely. She visited her uncle, Elder Samuel Iadil Williams, in his traditional compound in Surulere. Uncle Iadil was a man respected throughout Lagos, known for his wisdom and his connections. When Ade told him what Marcus had done, the affairs, the financial manipulation, the stolen design she'd created that Marcus now claimed as his own, the old man's face hardened. "That boy's father was a good man," Uncle Iadil said, shaking his head. "But Marcus, he has forgotten our ways. He has forgotten that the hen that eats her own eggs, it is not for nothing." "Uncle, I need your help," Ade said. "Not for revenge. For justice." Uncle Iadil studied his niece for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Tell me what you need." Ade also met with a private investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Blessing who'd once been a detective with the Nigerian police force. What Blessing uncovered in those 3 weeks was staggering. Marcus wasn't just a successful developer. He was a criminal. He'd been bribing government officials, using substandard materials in his buildings, embezzling from his investors. The luxury towers he built across Lagos were accidents waiting to happen. And Chidinma, his beautiful bride-to-be, she wasn't just his secretary. She was his accomplice, helping him cook the books and hide his crimes. "This is enough to put him away for years," Blessing said, sliding a thick folder across the table at their meeting in a discreet cafe in Lekki. "Why wait for his wedding? Take this to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission now." "Because," Ade said, touching the folder with careful fingers, "I want him to feel what I felt. I want him to stand in front of everyone he respects, everyone he wanted to impress, and lose everything in a single moment. The night before the wedding, Lara came to help Ade get ready. They laid out the emerald green dress Ade had chosen, traditional Yoruba oak fabric, expertly tailored to accommodate her belly. It was beautiful, dignified, and expensive. Are you sure about this? Lara asked. Marcus is unpredictable, Ade. Dangerous even. I'm sure. Ade looked at herself in the mirror. She looked tired. Pregnancy and stress had carved shadows under her eyes. But she also looked strong. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm ready. She wasn't ready. Nobody could have been ready for what Marcus Babatunde Okonkwo would do in front of 200 witnesses. But as Ade would learn, sometimes the worst moment of your life becomes the doorway to your greatest triumph. The wedding was set for 2 o'clock at the prestigious Oriental Hotel. Ade arrived at exactly 2:30 p.m. The Oriental Hotel's grand ballroom was decorated like something from a fever dream of wealth. White orchids cascaded from crystal chandeliers, and ice sculptures of swans melted slowly in the Lagos heat, despite the aggressive air conditioning. Ade counted at least 3 traditional drummers, a full orchestra, and what appeared to be a synchronized dance troupe waiting in the wings. Marcus had always believed that more was more. Ade stepped through the carved wooden doors, her emerald dress flowing around her, and felt the room's energy shift. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. She'd expected this. Marcus had successfully painted her as the villain in their divorce, the unfaithful wife, the gold digger, the woman who trapped him with a pregnancy that might not even be his. Half of Lagos society believed his lies. The other half simply enjoyed the spectacle. Adeline. A familiar voice cut through the whispers. Auntie Mornike, Marcus's mother, swept toward her in a blaze of gold gelly and righteous indignation. You have some nerve showing your face here. Have you no shame? Ade met the older woman's eyes steadily. I was invited, Ma. Your son specifically requested my presence. My son is too forgiving, too kind. Always has been. Auntie Mornike's voice carried across the ballroom, and Ade knew this was intentional. The woman was performing. Even after you betrayed him, carried another man's child. That's enough, Mother. Marcus had appeared at his mother's elbow, resplendent in a cream-colored agbada with gold embroidery. He looked every inch the successful Lagos big boy, designer watch glinting, shoes polished to mirrors, that practiced smile that had once made Ade's heart race. Now it just made her stomach turn. Adeline, he said warmly, taking her hand as if they were old friends. You came. I'm so glad. Up close she could see the calculation in his eyes. He'd invited her for this, the theater of it. The magnanimous ex-husband, so secure in his new life that he could welcome his unfortunate ex-wife to his wedding. It was a power play, a final humiliation. I wouldn't have missed it, Ade replied, extracting her hand. Where's the bride? Getting ready for her entrance. You know she loves drama. Marcus laughed, but his eyes were cold. Come, let me introduce you to some people. Show everyone there are no hard feelings. He guided her through the crowd with a hand on her lower back, a gesture of possession disguised as courtesy. Ade allowed it, smiling blandly as Marcus introduced her to business associates, government officials, and social climbers. Each introduction was a small cruelty. This is Adeline, my ex-wife. Yes, the architect, well, she used to be. Now she does. What is it you do now, Ade? Freelance. And yes, she's expecting. 6 months along. Isn't life surprising? We had our problems, but I want only the best for her. I'm a believer in forgiveness. Each word was a calculated cut, delivered with a smile. The crowd ate it up, some with sympathy, some with barely concealed glee. Lagos society loved nothing more than a public degradation. Uncle Iadil appeared at Ade's elbow during a particularly painful conversation with one of Marcus's investors. Ifioma, he said, using her middle name. Come, let me show you something. He led her to a quiet corner near the balcony. Are you all right? Yes, uncle. And strangely she was. Each of Marcus's little cruelties only hardened her resolve. Is everything in place? Yes. My friend at the EFCC received the files this morning. They're reviewing the evidence now. Uncle Iadil's expression was grave. But Ade, they won't move immediately. These things take time. I know. Ade touched the small recording device hidden in her clutch purse. That's why I have Plan B. The wedding ceremony itself was mercifully brief. Chidinma made her entrance in a dress that probably cost more than Ade's current annual income. White beaded lace with a train that required 3 children to carry it. She was beautiful in that polished, manufactured way. Her makeup airbrushed to perfection. Her smile practiced and perfect. She looked at Ade exactly once during the ceremony. The look said, I won. Ade smiled back. The smile said, we'll see. The reception began with the traditional Yoruba ceremony. The couple prostrating before the elders, receiving blessings, sharing wine. Then the Western touches. The first dance, the speeches, the cutting of the massive 7-tier cake. Ade sat at a table in the back, slowly eating small bites of jollof rice, waiting. Lara had texted. I'm outside with the package. Say the word. The speeches began. Marcus's friends told exaggerated stories of his success, his generosity, his vision. No one mentioned his ex-wife sitting quietly in the back, her hand resting on her belly where their child, definitely their child despite his public doubts, kicked and turned. Then Marcus stood to give his own speech. Today is about new beginnings, he said, raising his champagne glass. About leaving the past behind and embracing the future. I've learned that some people are meant to be in your life forever. He looked at Chidinma adoringly. And some people are just lessons you needed to learn. His eyes found Ade across the room. I learned a lot from my first marriage. I learned about betrayal. I learned about women who love money more than they love their husbands. I learned about lies and manipulation. The room had gone silent. This was beyond the pale, even for Lego Society's love of drama. But I also learned about forgiveness. That's why I invited Adeline today. To show her and everyone here that I bear no grudges. That despite everything, despite the affairs, the lies, the child that probably isn't mine, I can rise above it. Ade stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate. Every eye in the room turned to her. Marcus, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the silent ballroom. Thank you for that speech. You're right about lessons. I learned a lot from our marriage too. She walked toward him, her emerald dress rustling with each step. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. I learned that the man I loved was a thief who stole my architectural designs. I learned that he was an embezzler who stole from his investors. I learned that he built substandard buildings that could collapse and kill people. I learned that he bribed government officials and cooked his books. Marcus's face had gone white. You're delusional. Pregnant women, they become emotional. I learned, Ade continued, now standing directly in front of him, that sometimes the only way to expose a monster is to let him think he's won. Marcus's hand shot out and grabbed the front of her dress. You lying bitch, he hissed. You come to my wedding and... He yanked hard. The sound of tearing fabric echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Time seemed to slow down in that impossible moment. Ade felt the silk tear, felt the cool air on her skin, heard the collective gasp of 200 people. She stood there in her slip, the ruins of her emerald dress in Marcus's fist, and felt something unexpected, relief. Because now, everyone could see exactly who Marcus Babatunde Okonkwo really was. This, Marcus announced, holding up the torn fabric like a trophy, his face twisted with rage, is what happens to women who don't know their place. Auntie Mornike had her hand over her mouth. Chidinma stood frozen at the head table. Her perfect wedding moment transformed into a nightmare. Uncle Iadil had already removed his agbada, walking toward Ade to cover her. But Ade held up her hand, stopping him. Thank you for this gift, she said to Marcus, her voice steady despite her near-nakedness, despite the humiliation burning in her cheeks. Thank you for showing everyone exactly who you are. She reached into her clutch purse, miraculously still on her shoulder, and pulled out her phone. You wanted to talk about lessons, Marcus? Let me share mine. Her fingers flew across the screen. I'm sending a video to everyone in this room right now. Check your phones. The ballroom filled with the sound of notification chimes. People reached for their devices, curiosity overcoming propriety. Don't you dare. Marcus lunged for her phone, but Uncle Iadil stepped between them. his elderly frame suddenly imposing. "Lay one more hand on her," the old man said quietly. "And elder or not, I will forget my manners." Ade pressed play on her own phone, holding it up. Her voice rang out from the speaker, clear and strong. "This is a recording from 3 months ago. Marcus, you remember this conversation, don't you? The one where you told your accountant, Emeka, exactly how to hide the substandard materials you used in the Lekki Towers project." Marcus's voice came next from the recording, tinny but unmistakable. "I don't care if the concrete isn't up to spec, Emeka. Nobody checks these things properly in Lagos. Not if you pay the right people. We'll save 2 million naira, and no one will know the difference." The blood drained from Marcus's face. That's fake. Deepfake technology, she's. "There's more," Ade continued. Another video started playing on phones around the room. This one showed Marcus meeting with a government official in a restaurant, sliding an envelope across the table. "This was 2 months ago. That's Commissioner Adebayo, isn't it? The one who approved your building permits for the Victoria Island project?" The envelope contained 500,000 naira. "Stop this." Chidinma finally found her voice, her perfect bride facade cracking. "This is our wedding. You're just bitter and jealous." "Oh, Chi, I have videos of you too," Ade said, and despite everything, she felt a grim satisfaction at the fear that flashed across Chidinma's face. "Like the one where you and Marcus laugh about the stupid investors who believed his projected returns. Or the one where you helped him create false financial statements. Should I share those two?" The ballroom had erupted into chaos. People were standing, shouting, arguing. Some were watching the videos with horror. Others were already heading for the exits, not wanting to be associated with the scandal that was unfolding. Marcus grabbed Ade's shoulders, shaking her. "You have no idea what you've done. Do you know who I am? Who my friends are? I will destroy you. Mr. Okonkwo." A new voice cut through the chaos. A tall man in a dark suit stood at the ballroom entrance, flanked by 4 others. "I'm Detective Oyamide from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. I'm going to need you to step away from the lady." Marcus's hands dropped from Ade's shoulders like she'd burned him. "We've been reviewing some very interesting evidence," Detective Oyamide continued, walking into the ballroom with measured steps. "Evidence of fraud, embezzlement, bribery, and criminal negligence in construction standards. We have some questions for you. For both of you." He nodded at Chidinma. "This is my wedding," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "You can't just. We can and we are. You can come voluntarily, or we can arrest you here in front of your guests. Your choice." The mighty Marcus Babatunde Okonkwo, Lagos big boy and master manipulator, looked around the ballroom like a trapped animal. His mother was crying. His bride was backing away from him, already calculating how to distance herself from the sinking ship. His friends and associates were avoiding his eyes. Finally, his gaze landed on Ade, still standing in her slip, Uncle Ayodele's agbada now draped over her shoulders. "You planned this," he whispered. "All of it. The invitation coming here. You wanted me to humiliate you publicly." "Yes," Ade said simply, "because I knew that if you thought you'd won, you'd get careless. You'd show everyone exactly who you are. And I wanted witnesses, Marcus. I wanted 200 of Lagos's elite to see you rip the dress off your pregnant ex-wife. I wanted them to see your rage, your cruelty, your complete lack of control." She stepped closer to him, close enough that only he could hear her next words. "I wanted them to understand why, when the EFCC arrests you, when the newspapers print the evidence of your crimes, when your investors sue you for every naira you stole from them, I wanted them to remember this moment and know that you deserved everything that's coming." Marcus's face contorted with rage and despair. For a moment Ade thought he might hit her. But Detective Oyamide was already taking his arm, leading him toward the exit. Chidinma tried to make a run for it, but 2 female officers intercepted her at the service entrance. Her screams of protest echoed through the ballroom as they handcuffed her. The wedding guests stood in stunned silence as the bride and groom were led away from their own reception. Lara fought her way through the crowd to Ade's side, carrying a bag with fresh clothes. "Come on, let's get you dressed properly. You did it, Ade. You actually did it." But Ade wasn't watching Marcus being taken away. She was watching the guests, seeing the dawning realization on their faces. seeing Auntie Mornike collapse into a chair, finally understanding what her son had become, seeing Marcus's friends and business partners making urgent phone calls, trying to protect themselves from the scandal. No, Ade said quietly, one hand resting on her belly where her daughter, she'd found out last week it was a girl, kicked steadily. Justice did it. I just made sure everyone was watching. Uncle Ayodele placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Your grandmother would be proud. She always said the truth is like a cork. You can push it underwater, but eventually it rises. As Lara helped her into a simple dress from the bag, Ade felt the weight of the past 6 months begin to lift. She was still pregnant and alone. She was still rebuilding her career from scratch. She would still face challenges. But Marcus Babatunde Okonkwo would never hurt her again. The ballroom was emptying rapidly now, guests fleeing the scandal. Ade gathered her things and prepared to leave. Ma'am. One of the young waiters approached nervously. The kitchen wants to know what to do with all the food. And the cake. Ade looked at the massive 7-tier cake, untouched and perfect. A monument to Marcus's ego and excess. Box it up, she said. All of it. Send it to the children's hospital in Ikeja. Tell them it's from. She paused, considering. From a wedding that didn't quite work out. As she walked out of the Oriental Hotel, Uncle Ayodele on one side and Lara on the other, Ade felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months. Hope. But the story was far from over. The video went viral within hours. By the time Ade returned to her modest apartment in Ikeja, the footage of Marcus ripping her dress had been viewed over 2 million times on social media. Hashtag Lagos wedding shame was trending. Hashtag justice for Ade was everywhere. Even international news outlets had picked it up. Nigerian tycoon arrested at his own wedding after assaulting pregnant ex-wife. Ade sat on her small couch, watching her phone explode with notifications, feeling oddly detached from it all. Lara was fielding calls from reporters. Uncle Ayodele was speaking with his network of elders and community leaders, controlling the narrative in traditional circles. 3 networks want exclusive interviews, Lara said, scrolling through her phone. And 2 publishers want book deals. Ade, do you realize what this means? You're not just getting justice, you're getting your life back. But Ade wasn't thinking about interviews or book deals. She was thinking about the look on Marcus's face as he was led away in handcuffs. Not the rage or the fear, the surprise. He genuinely believed he was untouchable. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Adeline Williams? An older woman's voice, cultured and careful. Yes. This is Olayinka Badmus. I'm a senior partner at Badmus and Associates Architecture. I saw the news today. I also saw the designs Marcus claimed as his own, the Lekki Towers, the Victoria Island complex. I've worked in this industry for 30 years, and I knew immediately those designs weren't his. They were too good, too innovative. Ade's heart began to race. Ms. Williams, I'd like to meet with you. I think you and I have a lot to discuss about your future in architecture. Over the next week, Ade's life transformed in ways she couldn't have imagined. The EFCC investigation uncovered a web of corruption that extended far beyond Marcus and Chidinma. 7 government officials were suspended. 15 of Marcus's buildings were condemned pending structural reviews. His investors filed a class action lawsuit for 200 million naira. But the real earthquake came when structural engineers inspected the Lekki Towers, Marcus's flagship project, the crown jewel he'd built using Ade's stolen designs, but with substandard materials. The building is a death trap, the lead engineer told a press conference, his face grim. The concrete columns are 60% weaker than building code requires. If we'd had an earthquake or even a strong enough storm, the entire structure could have collapsed. We're talking potential casualties in the hundreds. Ade watched the press conference from Olayinka Badmus's office, a corner suite in a gleaming tower in Victoria Island, with a view of the very ocean she'd once seen from Marcus's mansion. Your designs could have been revolutionary, Olayinka said, reviewing the original plans Ade had created. If they'd been built properly, the Lekki Towers would have been a landmark. Instead, Marcus turned them into a catastrophe waiting to happen. Can they be saved? Ade asked. With massive renovations, perhaps. But it would be cheaper to demolish and rebuild. Olayinka looked at Ade over her reading glasses. Rebuild them properly this time. With the right architect. Ade met her gaze. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. 20% stake in the firm, your name on the door, and the Lekki Towers reconstruction as your first major project. But only if you're ready. You've been through hell, Adeline. If you need time. I'm ready, Ade said immediately. I've never been more ready. But not everything was going smoothly. 3 days after the wedding disaster, Ade received a visitor she didn't expect. Auntie Mornike. Marcus's mother stood at Ade's doorstep, looking smaller and older than she had at the wedding. The gold jewelry was gone. She wore a simple wrapper and blouse, her head tie modest. May I come in? She asked quietly. Ade considered refusing. This woman had publicly called her a cheater, a gold digger, a liar. But something in Auntie Mornike's face, a deep bone-tired sorrow, made Ade step aside. They sat in Ade's small living room, the silence awkward and heavy. I came to apologize, Auntie Mornike finally said. I knew. Not everything, but I knew Marcus was not treating you well. I knew about the other women. I told myself it was normal, that men have their ways, that you needed to be patient and submissive. She looked at Ade with tears in her eyes. I taught my son that women were less. That power meant you could do whatever you wanted. His father was the same way and I accepted it. I defended it. And now look what I've created. A monster who nearly killed people with his greed. Who hurt the mother of his child in front of hundreds of people. Why are you telling me this? Ade asked, not unkindly. Because you need to know that what Marcus did, it's not just him. It's all of us who stayed silent. All of us who made excuses. All of us who taught our sons that being a man means being cruel. Auntie Mornike reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. This is the deed to a property in Surulere. It was supposed to be Marcus's inheritance from his father. Now it's yours. For my grandchild. Ade stared at the envelope. I can't accept this. Yes, you can. Because my grandchild deserves a mother who knows how to fight. And a grandmother who knows how to admit when she's wrong. Auntie Mornike stood to leave. I may not be able to fix what Marcus broke, but I can start here. After she left, Ade opened the envelope. The property was worth at least 50 million naira. She called Uncle Ayodele. It's not enough to destroy the monster, she told him. We need to change the system that created him. What do you have in mind, Ifeoma? A foundation. For women in architecture, engineering, construction, fields where they face discrimination and theft of their ideas. We'll call it the Adeline Williams Foundation for Women in Innovation. Funded with Mornike's guilt money? Uncle Ayodele chuckled. Your grandmother would definitely approve. The foundation launched 2 weeks later. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of women came forward with stories of stolen designs, sabotaged careers, harassment, and discrimination in Lagos's construction industry. But Marcus wasn't finished. From prison awaiting trial, he had one card left to play. His lawyers filed an emergency petition claiming that Ade had orchestrated an illegal entrapment, that her evidence was inadmissible, and, most horrifically, that she had deliberately provoked him at his wedding, knowing he would react violently in order to manipulate public opinion. He's trying to make you the villain again, Lara said, reading the legal documents. He's claiming you're the abuser, that you psychologically tormented him. Can it work? Ade asked. Her daughter kicked hard against her ribs, as if in protest. In Nigeria's legal system? Maybe. Especially if he gets the right judge, makes the right payments. Lara's face was grim. We need to be prepared for the possibility that Marcus might walk away from this. That night Ade lay awake, one hand on her belly, thinking about justice. True justice. The kind that didn't just punish one man but changed the system itself. She thought about all the women who'd contacted the foundation. The architect whose male colleague took credit for her award-winning design. The engineer who was paid half what her male counterparts earned. The construction manager who was told she was too emotional when she reported safety violations. Marcus Babatunde Okonkwo was one man. But the problem was bigger than him. The next morning, Ade made a decision that would change everything. The courtroom was packed when Marcus's trial began 3 months later. Ade sat in the front row. 8 months pregnant now, her belly so large she had to sit carefully. Lara was beside her, laptop open, ready to take notes. Uncle Iadil was in the row behind, a steady presence. Marcus looked different. Prison had thinned him, taken away his polish. The designer watches were gone. The arrogance had been replaced by something harder, more desperate. His lawyer was good, one of Lagos's best, paid for by what remained of Marcus's assets before they were frozen. The strategy was exactly what Lara had predicted. Paint Ade as a vindictive ex-wife who had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to destroy an innocent man. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the defense attorney began, "this is not a story about corruption or crime. This is a story about a woman scorned. A woman who used her pregnancy, her innocence, and the power of social media to weaponize public opinion against my client." Ade listened without emotion as the lawyer detailed her conspiracy. How she'd secretly recorded conversations, hired investigators, manipulated evidence, and deliberately provoked Marcus at his wedding. She knew, the lawyer said dramatically, that if she could make him lose his temper in front of Lagos's elite, she could destroy his reputation. She calculated every step. She is the real criminal here. When it was the prosecution's turn, they methodically laid out the evidence. The substandard materials, the bribed officials, the embezzled funds. They brought in structural engineers who testified about the danger Marcus's buildings posed. They brought in investors who'd lost millions. They brought in the accountant Emeka, who'd turned state's evidence and detailed every crime. But Marcus's lawyer kept returning to the same theme. None of this changes the fact that Adeline Williams entrapped my client. The trial dragged on for 2 weeks. And then came the moment that changed everything. The prosecution called Chidinma Nwosu to the stand. Marcus's former bride, his accomplice, his partner in crime, walked into the courtroom looking nothing like the polished woman who'd worn that designer wedding dress. She wore prison-issue clothing, no makeup, her hair pulled back simply. "Ms. Nwosu," the prosecutor began, "you've agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. Tell us about your relationship with Marcus Okonkwo." What Chidinma revealed over the next 3 hours destroyed any remaining sympathy for Marcus. She detailed how Marcus had pursued her deliberately, targeting her because she was skilled with numbers and had flexible morals. She described how he'd planned to divorce Ade long before the pregnancy. He'd just been waiting for the right moment to maximize his financial advantage. "He told me Ade was too smart," Chidinma said, her voice flat. "He said she asked too many questions about the business, wanted to review the books. He needed her gone before she discovered what we were doing." "And the pregnancy?" the prosecutor asked. When she told him she was pregnant, he was furious. A child meant legal complications, potential claims on his assets. That's when he decided to destroy her completely. Divorce her, take the business, ruin her reputation so no one would believe anything she said. Marcus's face had gone white. His lawyer was frantically scribbling notes, preparing objections. "And the wedding?" the prosecutor continued. "Why invite her to the wedding?" Chidinma looked directly at Marcus for the first time. "Because he's cruel. He wanted to see her suffer one more time. He wanted to parade his victory in front of her. He told me." She paused. "He told me that if she cried or made a scene, it would prove she was the unstable, emotional woman he'd been telling everyone about. And what did he say he would do if she didn't react the way he wanted? He said he'd make her react. He said he'd humiliate her so badly she'd have no choice but to break down." The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. When the defense tried to cross-examine Chidinma, she didn't waver. Yes, she was getting a reduced sentence for her testimony. No, she wasn't lying. Yes, she was guilty too. But Marcus had been the architect of everything, the corruption, the crimes, the cruelty. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Chidinma said, looking at Ade for the first time. "What I did was wrong. But at least I'm telling the truth now." Marcus would let this entire courtroom burn before he'd admit he did anything wrong. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. "On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of bribery, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of criminal negligence, guilty, guilty, guilty." Marcus Babatunde Okonkwo was sentenced to 15 years in prison without the possibility of early parole. His assets were seized to repay investors and fund the reconstruction of his dangerously built structures. His name, once synonymous with success in Lagos, became a cautionary tale. But for Ade, the real victory came 2 weeks after the verdict. She went into labor on a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of a meeting at her new architectural firm. Lara drove her to the hospital, running 3 red lights and swearing in both English and Yoruba the entire way. "You couldn't wait 1 more hour?" Lara shouted as another contraction hit Ade. "We were about to finalize the Lekki Towers contract." "Tell that to your goddaughter," Ade gasped, laughing despite the pain. 17 hours later, Folarin Iamide Williams entered the world. 7 pounds 3 ounces of furious, screaming determination. When the nurse placed her in Ade's arms, Ade looked down at her daughter's face and saw the future. Not a future defined by Marcus's cruelty or society's judgment. Not a future limited by what men thought women could or couldn't do. A future where a girl could grow up knowing that when someone tries to tear you down, you can choose to rise instead. "Look at you," Ade whispered to her daughter. "You're already louder than your father ever was." Uncle Ayodele arrived with half the family, bringing enough food to feed the entire maternity ward. Auntie Mornike came too, tears streaming down her face as she held her granddaughter for the first time. "She has your eyes," the old woman said. "Strong eyes. Fighter's eyes." "She'll need them," Ade replied. "The world isn't easy on strong women." "No," Auntie Mornike agreed. "But maybe with mothers like you, it will be easier for her generation than it was for ours." 3 months later, the Adeline Williams Foundation for Women in Innovation held its first annual conference. Over 500 women attended. Architects, engineers, construction managers, students. They came from Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, and beyond. They came with stories of discrimination and dreams of change. Ade stood on the stage, baby Folarin strapped to her chest in a carrier, and looked out at the sea of faces. "A year ago," she began, "I was standing in a ballroom in my underwear, publicly humiliated by the man I'd once loved. I could have let that moment define me. I could have let the shame and anger consume me. Instead, I chose to let it transform me." She paused, adjusting Folarin, who was starting to fuss. "Marcus Okonkwo tried to destroy me because I was a threat to his power. But here's what he didn't understand. You can't destroy someone who refuses to be destroyed. You can tear their dress, steal their designs, ruin their reputation, but you can't touch their spirit unless they let you." The audience erupted in applause. "So this foundation isn't about revenge. It's about revolution. It's about making sure that the next brilliant woman architect doesn't have to fight as hard as I did. It's about changing the system that creates men like Marcus Okonkwo in the first place." After the conference, as Ade was packing up, a young woman approached her. Couldn't have been more than 22, clutching a portfolio. "Ms. Williams? I'm Adiz. I'm studying architecture at the University of Lagos. I saw what happened at the wedding and I wanted to give up. I thought if someone as talented as you could be treated that way, what chance did I have? And now," Ade asked gently, "now I know that being treated badly doesn't mean I have to stay down. You got back up. You fought. You won." Adiz's eyes were shining. "I can do that too." "Yes," Ade said, shifting Folarin to her other shoulder. "You can. And you will. And when someone tries to tear your dress, metaphorically or literally, you'll look them in the eye and thank them for showing everyone who they really are." That evening, Ade stood on her new apartment balcony, not in Ikeja anymore, but in a modest building in Ikoyi, close to her office. Folarin was asleep in her crib. The Lagos skyline stretched out before them, lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere in that city, in a prison cell, Marcus was probably still telling himself he was the victim. Still believing that Ade had wronged him. Still unable to see his own cruelty. Ade didn't waste time thinking about him anymore. She thought about the Lekki Towers reconstruction, which would begin next month. She thought about the 3 new associates she was hiring at the firm. All women, all brilliant. She thought about Adiz and the hundreds of young women like her who were watching, learning, believing that they could be more. She thought about Folarin growing up in a world that was slowly, painfully becoming more just. Your grandmother used to say that the hen who eats her own eggs does so for a reason, Ade whispered to her sleeping daughter. Your father ate his eggs, his integrity, his humanity, his soul. He consumed everything good in himself for power and money. She kissed Fullerin's forehead gently. But you, my love, you're going to be different. You're going to know that real power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. You're going to know that success means nothing if it's built on cruelty. You're going to know that when someone tries to humiliate you, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be humiliated. A text message lit up her phone. It was from Alayinka. The Badejo family wants to commission us for their new office complex. This would be our biggest project yet. Are you ready? Ade looked at her daughter, at the Lagos skyline, at the future spreading out before them like an open road. She typed back, I was born ready. Because Adeline Folisade Williams had learned the most important lesson of all. You can tear someone's dress, but you can't tear their spirit. You can try to destroy someone's reputation, but you can't destroy their truth. You can humiliate someone in front of hundreds of people, but you can't take away their power unless they give it to you. And Ade would never give her power away again. She was done being a victim. She was done being defined by Marcus's cruelty or society's judgment. She was done playing small to make insecure men feel big. She was Adeline Folisade Williams, survivor, architect, mother, revolutionary. And she was just getting started.